Today we are talking homemade sourdough noodles. Now, for this, you're not going to need anything special for equipment. The fanciest thing that you're going to need is a rolling pin. And if you don't have one of those, you can use anything that is long and a cylinder that will help you roll out the pasta dough. Now, I put about 2 to 3 cups of flour down, and I don't always measure it. Sometimes I just kind of dump it out onto the counter. Anything that's extra when you have flour and the eggs, it just won't get incorporated to the dough. So don't worry too much about being too exact. Plus, it's going to depend on how many eggs you have and how liquidy your whole concoction is on how much flour to egg ratio that you'll need. So as you saw, I put 5 eggs into the well of flour. So you want to make sure that you have like kind of a nice little hole in the flour to put your eggs into. And then you're going to take a fork and slowly whisk everything together. And you're going to slowly start to put in flour around the well and mix it until starts to get more and more incorporated. And as you can see here, I'm kind of pushing some of the sides in as I need to. And it's going to get a little bit thicker and a little bit more dough-like as we go on. Next, I am going to put in my sourdough starter. Now, I usually don't measure the amount of sourdough starter I put in there, but it tends to be about somewhere between a half a cup and a cup, depending on how much I need to get rid of in order to feed it for my next dough. And so here you can see it's a little bit on the thicker side, and it definitely works a little bit better if you have a little bit more of a thinner starter, but it is not to say that you can't use thick because it works out just fine. You're just going to want to make sure that you mix and knead it very well so that your starter gets well incorporated. So once I get it to the point where it is no longer going to run out of the well, the liquid part of the eggs, I take my bench scraper and I start to incorporate all of the dough together. So I mix the flour and the egg, and I kind of just like keep folding and chopping it together to get it as incorporated as I can before I move on to just kneading it with my hands. So as you can see, I am just kind of pushing it together and getting it as much as I can into like a dough ball. And it's going to take about a minute or two to really get it into something that you can knead very well. And as you can see, it's starting to come together even more. This is after about a couple of minutes of kneading. You can see it's into like a nice dough ball here. And you're going to want to knead for probably at least about 5 minutes. The longer you knead, the more it's going to get into that kind of like shiny type of dough. And, sometimes I don't always knead it as long as it should be, but especially when I'm doing a sourdough noodle, I find that there's a little bit of forgiveness in the kneading because you have some of that bulk ferment that happens when you let it sit. And you can see that was right before I put it to sit for a couple of hours. It had a nice little spring back. That's what you want to see. So right now it has been sitting for a couple of hours, and I am just taking off a piece with my bench scraper, and I am flattening it out with my palm of my hand and putting a little bit of flour onto the table surface. So now I am just taking my rolling pin and I am rolling out the flour, rolling out the noodles. And you just want to keep kind of flipping the sides back and forth and rolling it out as thin as you can. And sometimes this takes about a minute or two. The more practice you get with it, the easier it becomes. And you can definitely get these done really quickly. So again, you're just going to want to keep rolling it back and forth as big as you can. And this is about where I want it, just a little bit thinner. And then I'm going to go and take a pizza cutter and I am going to start to cut out the noodles. And so I usually just roll it out and I take a pizza cutter and cut it to the length that I want it. After I cut it with the pizza cutter, I will dust it with a little bit of flour so that they don't stick together if I am taking some time before I put it into the boiling water. And that water you want to make sure is nice and hot and boiling. You're going to put it in there for about 2 to 3 minutes. Once it's done, it's going to float to the top. And you can go ahead and put it into whatever sauce you are making. and you are going to have some delicious homemade sourdough noodles. Now, don't forget to like and subscribe and share with your friends if you thought this was helpful. And make sure to check out the rest of my videos and where I've made tons of other sourdough noodle dishes with great sauces to enjoy.